Welcome to Around the Well, the official podcast of the town of Wellington. I am Jerry Martin, your host and the communications specialist for the town of Wellington. Thank you for supporting this 6th episode of Around the Well as we aspire to create a space for the discussion of issues that impact our town and our community here in Wellington. Episode 6 features a conversation with outgoing Wellington Mayor Calar Chaussee, who talks about the reasons he ran for mayor in 2022, what happened during his 4-year term, and the future he envisions for Wellington. We're joined today by Wellington Mayor Calar Chaussee, whose term is going to come to an end later this month. Mayor Chaussee, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Jerry.
So I guess to start things out, it's been 4 years since you were elected. Thinking back to 2022, what were the reasons that you decided to run for mayor?
Yeah, actually, at the time, none of the candidates are what I wanted to represent me or the town. I'd grown up here since the early 90s, and jokingly, 4 years prior, when the previous mayor was running, I told my buddy, hey, I should run for mayor. And then he ended up calling me shortly before the deadline to turn stuff in and convinced me to run, and the rest is history.
So you get elected in 2022, and then pretty kind of quickly, right off the bat, you're faced with one of the probably biggest problems that Wellington's ever faced, which was you had water plants that were out of compliance, out of capacity, and the fix for that was going to be the biggest infrastructure investment in town history, including multi-million-dollar loans.
Yeah.
Can you talk about the process that led to the decision to expand those plants?
Yeah. I'd say the decision, it did begin before my board came along.
Sure.
But we were faced with more or less approving moving forward with the projects and pulling those SRF loans. There was no other way to go about it.
Sure.
The plants were running at 80 to 90% capacity day in and day out, almost 100% on a couple days. And that's just unsustainable. And that's going to cost more money in the long run. So the smart thing to do, which is what we did, is decided to upgrade those plants, the treatment plant and the wastewater plant, and then set them up to get us set up for the future as well and make it cheaper down the road to expand on those.
There really wasn't much to weigh then. It was just kind of what you had to do to move forward?
Yeah.
Okay. And I think in a lot of ways, those were sort of appropriate projects to face so early on because it was really representative of that larger issue that you were going to face for most of your time as mayor, which was managing the growth here in Wellington, which is a really tricky thing, especially I think in a municipal setting. You had a lot of people on one side who kind of want all of the same opportunities that you get in a place like Denver, and on the other side, you got folks who don't want anything to change from when they were growing up, basically. So how do you balance those interests that kind of come from both sides of the spectrum like that?
Yeah, that's the tricky part,
Sure.
right?
Mm-hmm.
I always say, if you're not growing, you're dying.
Mm-hmm.
And so the municipality, any town, city, needs to have growth of one way, shape, or form. And there comes a point where it's no longer going to be what it was.
Mm-hmm.
It's inevitable.
Right.
And me growing up here, I was here before there was even a stoplight.
Mm-hmm.
So I understood where people were coming from, where they didn't want the change, because
Sure.
they knew Wellington of old.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the people that wanted the change had moved here probably within the last decade or so.
Sure.
And finding that middle ground, but also making it very clear that this town will never succeed if we don't continue to grow.
Right, yeah.
But we need to grow responsibly and in the right way.
Did you take any steps to kind of help form a cohesive vision for that growth as Wellington moved forward?
Yeah, so, the board and myself as a whole have our strategic plan that we came up with. Well, and also kind of our guiding light was development pays its own way.
Sure.
Ensuring that we're not spending money on things developers are doing. And then growing responsibly, and that's by bringing business here.
Okay.
You've seen the town. It's mostly homes.
Mm-hmm.
It's a bedroom community.
Mm-hmm.
And for it to be successful, it definitely needs that economic development.
Sure, yeah. Well, and that's, there's a lot of different aspects to managing growth. I think commercial is one of them. Another one I think is, you kind of brought it up, is residential development. Mm-hmm. And residential growth is something that has been happening here for years. I think, maybe 10 years before you took over as mayor is really kind of when it got big. And as the community continued to expand, how did you approach decisions related to that kind of development, and what factors did you consider, evaluating as you kind of made sure that this new development would fit in with that long-term vision?
Yeah. I mean, so like the biggest development that we were faced with is going to be like the later portion of Sage Farms, I
Sure.
believe.
Hmm.
And it's going to be a 25-year build out. It's going to be mixed residential, commercial, and different styles of residential. There's going to be multifamily or multi-unit, um, things of that nature, and then some larger acreage lots too, so people can age into the community and still have some affordability. And I think ensuring that we weren't taking less money than we should for taps or
Hmm.
anything of that nature, and making sure the money's going towards what the real infrastructure is. So the development is covering itself with that infrastructure.
Okay. That makes sense. And then, we touched on it a little bit earlier, but commercial development, which I think is maybe even trickier than residential development, because you can kind of plan for it, you can kind of plan around it, but in most cases, a town this size never takes it on directly. What did you do to create an environment here that would be conducive to that kind of growth?
Yeah. I mean, as a board, we came together and we decided to get a business liaison. And so she works directly with our Main Streets program currently,
Hmm.
with the more or less the corridor businesses.
Okay.
And she does reach out to other businesses as well. And then we got a business development manager or
Hmm.
economic development manager. And she's actually out there promoting us, trying to get businesses to come to town. We're kind of in like an interesting stage because most larger businesses aren't looking at coming to municipality till they're about 15,000 people.
Okay.
And so we're just at like that teeter point.
Right there.
And so what can we do to get them here sooner if we
Hmm.
can
Yeah.
is really the key.
Okay, and we talked a little bit about balancing interests involved in development, and sometimes they aren't just different interests. Sometimes they're completely opposite of one another, which I think happens a lot in this kind of local government. How do you navigate a situation that requires you to pick between two of those opposing interests, especially when it's like a close call and there's not a clear-cut right answer?
Yeah, that's the challenge, right?
Hmm.
Well, I always went into a scenario or a situation like that, and I would look at the other person and be like, how can I be wrong
Hmm.
and make them right? And so I would try to do that in everything that we had to make a decision on that was difficult to make the decision on.
Sure.
But then at the end of the day, whether there was compromise or not, my heart always led me was what is for the greater good of the community as a whole
Okay.
and what will help us prosper in the long run.
Okay. And are those some things that you kind of learned from those experiences that you could apply elsewhere as your job as mayor? Kind of that same approach.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Working with people. So I've worked with people for a very long time. I'm a coach, a leadership coach,
Okay.
outside of here for an automotive shop. But it's always difficult. You always have to learn and change, and how you view things or how you approach people and have discussions and keep it respectful at the same time.
Okay.
And so, yeah, I think that's how I applied most everything as my time as mayor.
Okay.
Or I'd like to think so.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. We already talked a little bit about the town's infrastructure with water plants, but I think there's been a lot of other stuff going on with infrastructure development that really doesn't kind of draw the same kind of public attention. Our Public Works Department continues to do a great job planning for infrastructure improvements while keeping up with the repairs that are there. Town staff continues to serve residents in new ways. And on top of that, in the past couple of years, the town has gone through master planning process for a few really important areas: transportation, housing, and parks and recreation. What would you tell a resident who's concerned about infrastructure development keeping up with residential and commercial development?
Yeah, I would say I understand the concern, but with where we're at today, with the leadership that we have at the town staff and with the board,
Hmm.
we're all in a very good understanding and also a good place for growth and ensuring that the infrastructure can keep up with it. We're obviously going to keep improving or redoing the stuff that wasn't taken care of years ago by developers or agreements or things of that nature, right? Fixing roads and sidewalks.
Sure.
But we are ensuring that the growth will not impact our infrastructure in a negative manner.
Okay, that makes sense. And the other big aspect of infrastructure development, particularly when you have water utility like Wellington does, is the availability of resources, which is unfortunately something you had to deal with a lot during your time as mayor because of the impact that had on the price of water and water utility bills for residents. It's really also, unfortunately, one of those situations where you have a very big problem with no good solution. Knowing how much time and energy the board spent examining this issue while you were mayor, what would you tell somebody who has a hard time understanding why we can't just lower rates?
That's a okay. Yeah. um, it's a very unique issue, right? And so I think there's a common misconception that we don't have enough water or we can't treat it. Both of those are false.
Sure.
We've got plenty of water. We can definitely treat it now because of the plants. When it comes to the cost, though, that's tied to the 1983 agreement with North Pooter,
Mm-hmm.
which probably most people have heard of. And if they haven't, that's what got us here.
Right.
Right? The town was winning until probably about the early 2000s when the equation in that agreement flipped on its head, and then we started, having to pay a bunch for water. The one thing that was always a big challenge in the state of Colorado, it's an enterprise fund, so that money has to sustain itself, and you can only legally take so much out of another fund to put into that enterprise fund. And so they'll look at a new town hall, for example, and be like, they should have spent that on water.
Right.
Well, you can't.
Right, yeah.
And so really what it's going to help lower it right away is going to be more homes, more residential users. More users will lower the cost.
Okay.
And they're necessary with the loans. Same with commercial, right? And so growth is the way forward before any price reductions would even be possible.
Right. That definitely makes sense. I think, the town is also pursuing, multiple water sources, diversifying that sort of thing. Are you hopeful that those long-term solutions are going to yield positive results?
Yeah, very hopeful. That's one thing I was all about as mayor, was finding a secondary source. Most of the board was, well, I think the entire board was on that path as well. And there's some really hopeful projects, one in particular that could really help this town a lot, and other municipalities have already jumped on it. And so I think that would be huge. We definitely need that secondary source. I think it'll happen.
Okay. And I know we've talked a lot about development so far, but just to kind of put a bow on that subject, moving forward as a Wellington resident, what do you want the future of your town to look like?
I would love for this town to be self-sufficient, where people that live here can work here. You don't have to go all the way into Fort Collins or up to Cheyenne to get lumber or anything of that nature.
Sure.
Like you could have it on Home Depot or Menards or whatever the case may be here. And then also a place where kids have places to go hang out.
Right, yeah.
Rather than the park or, other things that kids do when there's nothing to do, right?
Right, yeah. The park too late at night when they're not supposed to be there.
Yeah.
There are a few other areas where the town has made a lot of progress during your time as mayor that I wanted to talk about. The first one is the finance department. And I think, it's one of those things, for a lot of reasons, there's really a strong sense of mistrust with a lot of people when it comes to the town government and financial propriety. However, in your term as mayor, that really kind of started to move the other way. We had the finance department has solidified its staffing. The town has worked to get current with annual audits. Finance advisory board formed. Financial management policies were updated. Financial documents and treasurer's reports are now readily available online. And as a cherry on top, and I'm definitely going to mess this name up, the town for 3 years in a row has earned the highly regarded Government Finance Officers Association's Distinguished Budget Presentation Award.
Yes.
It's a bit of a mouthful, but it is a very highly regarded honor for the town to have. From your perspective, what were the key reasons for all of these positive changes in the finance department?
Man, really starting with Nick David.
Sure, yeah.
What an amazing guy he is. And he really cares about this town.
Absolutely.
He had a strong financial background coming from Meridian beforehand. And just the team that got built behind him, right? We needed continuity, more or less, in that department. We had so much. Right when I got elected, I think we went through 3 different financial directors.
Oh, wow.
And then he came on, and yeah, the rest is history.
Yeah.
It was a huge accomplishment when we talk about the mistrust. I mean, we were behind on audits at 3 years, I believe.
Sure.
At the time. We're caught up now.
Yeah.
And to pull that off in that short of time is something else. We did 2 audits in a row, almost back to back each time. And town staff and Patty and the leadership there, and just us as a board, we were pushing forward as well. And we're now there. Like, Wellington has arrived with good books and really good transparency on that end of things.
So what would you tell somebody who still kind of holds on to that perception of the financial impropriety?
I would really question where they're getting their information.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
And I would point them to the town site where they can go look at the audits. They can see where we're at, the treasurer's reports. Wellington's in a good place financially, and we have all the transparency there where I don't believe there should be any mistrust in from what I've seen as mayor and an outsider, and now being involved. And yeah, I couldn't be more proud of Nick or David and the whole town staff, everybody involved there.
Great. So the other areas I wanted to talk about were the Wellington Public Library and Wellington Parks and Recreation. To start with Parks and Rec, since you've been mayor, Wellington has added at least one new park, has added more maintained public land, has installed new and improved amenities at most of the other parks, all while continuing to maintain the existing spaces. That didn't even get into the recreation team, which has just really, really multiplied their offerings. And last year, they reported having over 13,000 participants in their programming. And then also, at the library, Ross and his crew always offering new classes, new clubs, new partnerships that really open up opportunities in parts of the world to patrons. And that's on top of being a really trusted and safe space and source of information for residents. So based on your experience as both an elected official and a resident, why is it important for communities to invest in things like public libraries, public parks, and recreation programs?
Yeah, well, I really view those as investing in the public's health, their minds and their bodies, and I think that is super important to live a happy and healthy and long life, and then also create a sense of community, right? You get to meet people at the library. You get to meet people doing recreation.
Sure.
That's how you form friendships that may last a lifetime.
Mm-hmm. If you could add one new program to each of the library and Parks and Recreation, what would they be?
Ooh.
Or amenity or facility?
Yeah. When it comes to the library, honestly, it would be a newer, bigger building,
Sure.
or maybe just letting them expand in the Leaper Center as a whole.
Right, yeah. They are shoehorned into that space.
Yeah. And with the successes that every year there's more and more users of the library, more activities and things that they're giving. And so they've definitely outgrown where they're at.
Sure.
And so that would be a next big step for them. When it comes to Parks and Rec, honestly, a rec center. I mean, we've heard it plenty of times. Why don't we have a public pool? Blah, 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 blah. That is something that this town has wanted and needs, and hopefully can happen, in the near future.
Right, yeah.
And then maybe get some pickleball courts.
There you go. I'm sure there'd be a lot of happy pickleballers if that happened. Well, we started looking back at your term as mayor by talking about big infrastructure projects, and it seems kind of appropriate that we kind of bookend that look back with a different project. And construction on this one isn't going to get underway until after your term ends, but I mean, I've been with the town for 2 years, and one of the first things that I started working on when I started here was Cleveland Avenue construction project. Just a ton of pre-work has gone into that. And that's expected to get underway later this year. It'll bring a host of upgrades to downtown Wellington. It doesn't carry quite the same financial burden for the town, but it will put Wellington's Main Street under construction for the better part of a year. So why do you think it's so important to bring these improvements to downtown Wellington?
Yeah, I think it's beyond important. I think back, I was a firefighter in Windsor years ago, and Windsor's downtown was kind of similar to Wellington's. It wasn't full, kind of, I don't know, felt ran down. And they've revitalized their downtown. They did a project there, changed parking, sidewalks, and it's vibrant down there. Restaurants and growth. I think that's the exact same thing that will occur here with that project, beautifying things.
Sure. So you think that it'll result in more people using our Cleveland Avenue corridor?
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. It's going to be inviting. It's not going to be, where are we going? And we're extending the sidewalks and the entrance to the downtown like a whole nother block.
Sure.
So it's even more visible from the gas stations and, I-25 interchange. And that alone is going to invite in more travelers to just check out the restaurants or the small shops.
Sure, yeah. All right, well, I appreciate you taking a little time to reflect on your term with us. I think it was a really impactful 4 years for the town of Wellington. I just have a couple more questions to kind of wrap up this conversation. So thinking back on those 4 years and knowing what you know now and experience what you've experienced during your term, what would the Calar Chaussee that's sitting here today tell 2022 Calar Chaussee?
Yeah, that's That's a hard one to hold on.
Fair enough.
And just be willing to listen to both sides before making a decision. Really being prepared to do that with each and everything that came before the board. And the only other thing I would say is you have no idea like the friends you're going to make doing it.
Yeah.
And that's been pretty cool.
Yeah, that's probably one of the things you'll take away from this, I'm sure, for
Yeah.
positive aspects of this whole thing. What's next for you now that as your term's coming to an end here?
Yeah. Moving on with life.
Yeah.
I got married while I was a mayor.
Oh, okay, cool.
And so my wife's never known me as anything
Sure.
else.
Yeah.
And it's a stressful gig.
Yeah. Right.
And so I'm really excited to be more or less stress-free.
Yeah.
And enjoying life with her and starting a family and doing the things we like to do and go on vacation. We haven't gone on vacation.
Oh, wow.
Just
Yeah.
because I felt obligated to kind of be here.
Yeah. I mean, no use going if you're just going to be, your mind's still going to be here. So.
Yeah.
Right. Wow, that's great. That'll be awesome for you. And then lastly, just for the benefit of the listeners, we're recording this after the election, but before the election results are certified. So we don't necessarily have to aim this at anybody, but what advice do you have for future leaders of Wellington?
Yeah. What would I say? I mean, I would just say care about each and every single person that's on your board. Do everything you can to treat them and their ideas with respect, even if it may be contradicting what you think is best. And I think we have the right person that, got elected.
Okay.
Once the results came through, we'll see once they're official, but I think the town's in a really good spot.
Great. That's all the questions I had. Is there anything else that we haven't talked about that you want people to know about your time as mayor or just about the town in general?
I would just say keep looking forward. Wellington is it's like that teenage kid that's just getting ready to like blossom
Sure.
into a nice young adult.
Mm-hmm.
And we're right there. It's gonna, has its growing pains. We all know that already with
Sure.
utility bills and things of that nature. But they're not going to last forever.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of good things around the corner.
Great. Well, thank you very much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you, Jerry.
Wellington Mayor Calar Chaussee's term officially comes to a close on April 21st, when Wellington's next mayor and newly elected trustees are sworn in during a special meeting. That meeting takes place at 6:30 p.m. in the boardroom at the Leaper Center, located at 3800 Wilson Avenue in Wellington. The new board will continue to gather for regular meetings at 6:30 p.m. on the second and fourth Tuesdays of the month, and for work sessions at 6:30 p.m. on the third Tuesday of the month, all in the Leaper Center boardroom. More information about the Wellington Board of Trustees, along with information about town elections, projects, programs, and services, is available on the town's website at wellingtoncolorado.gov. That URL is listed in the notes for this episode. That's all for this episode of Around the Well. Special thanks to Wellington Mayor Calar Chaussee for talking to us about his time in office and his hopes for the future of Wellington, as well as for his 4 years of excellent service to the town. Remember to check the episode notes for links to the resources we talked about, and while you're there, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss our next episode. Thanks for listening, and we will catch you next time on Around the Well.